Good night and welcome to Mindful Live 467. I am your co-host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is presently the 21st of February. The month is closing in on an end. We're nearing the end of the second month of the year already. The 21st of February in 2025 as the year swiftly moves along. And we're here in Trinidad and Tobago, the beautiful Twin Island Republic, chilling, relaxing, and just looking at the news and the occurrences as they occur around us. And oh boy, are they occurring. Interesting stuff all along today. What are we going to talk about today? All right, defamation. And you know, I remember when I started doing some of this online talk. Hey, shy guy, what's happening? Have a lot dealing with. Well, hope it's dealt with properly, sir. I remember in the earlys talking about some of these things online and saying that some people, when I look at some of these people talking here, some of these people are giving their mouths lots of liberty. They're saying things that they can't verify. They're saying a lot of real wild stuff out there. And are they not worried that consequences may come up? Well, those consequences did come up eventually. Eventually, those consequences did arrive for some people. So there's defamation. There's defamation in the works for some. That's in the news. A blogger has several thousand to pay now. More race talk. We have Tanticams. Tanticams not studying anybody out here. Those who don't like her talking about race, well, that is them. Because Tanticams back in with more of the racial politics and pointing out certain racial oddities, according to her. Certain interesting things about race and party and who put who where and how many of what is where. Well, she spoke about that. I also saw some massive heist. Big heist out on the ocean. What they see, the story seems to suggest that it was a submarine kind of business, or at least a kind of submarine transporting some serious kilos out of Colombia allegedly. And in whatever the process of going down, how it went down was that apparently a Coast Guard went down with it. You know, details of such things will be sketchy forever. But as it stands, the Coast Guard were attempting to catch a drug submarine, and a Coast Guard perished. That's the story told by the news. I have nothing different for you other than that. Also in the news tonight, we're seeing criminal reform in Trinidad, criminal justice reform, where we're looking to be able to wipe the criminal records of people. Hey, Ronnie. Also on the backs of that Coast Guard find, well, it wasn't really a find because the find sunk. But on the backs of that too, they allegedly found 600 military-grade bullets in Cuba, in the bush in a bucket. In the bush in a bucket in Cuba, 600 military-grade bullets. Yikes. And lots of politics, but we're going to see if we can jump in to these stories one time and see what we make of it. All right, make sure you hit that like button, double tap the screen over there on TikTok. If you are viewing this on YouTube, hit that like button too. Drop a comment, tell me what you think. I'm glad you're reviewing it. Appreciate it, very appreciated. Make sure you are subscribed if you are not yet subscribed, and drop a comment. As I said, tell me what you think, tell me what your views are on the topic. Let's dive right in. News source blogger ordered to pay Munilal for defamatory Facebook post. Yikes. Yikes. I was telling people, do not let this internet thing make you get carried away. The law works slow sometimes, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work. Blogger, journalist, university instructor and communications consultant Rhoda Barrett has been ordered to pay Oropouche East MP Dr. Rudal Munilal for a defamatory post on her social media page in April 2020. That's quite some time ago. Justice Margaret Mohammed ordered Bharat to pay general damages of $75,000 and $19,000 in costs. She was also restrained from repeating the serious, accusatory, and sarcastic comments. The judge's order was made on February 21st. In an immediate response, Munilal said, as I've said repeatedly, my political opponents have been working overtime to tarnish my reputation. I have never been approached by police and asked one single question about my stewardship as a minister of government in the partnership administration. Those who peddle that propaganda will face the court. So this stemmed from what was a Facebook post, apparently, where the blogger, on noting that the MP, I believe, went to a police station and donated some bottles of water. And you know, this could be some advice on not getting yourself too caught up in the politicization of every single thing. Because maybe the donations of bottles of water should not be something that you attempt to get the political angle from. Maybe that might be the case. That, you know, when you see bottles of water being donated, you leave that alone when it comes to the political angle. Maybe that might be a lesson inside of here. But it apparently stemmed from that, where the MP donated bottles of water to a police station. And the blogger, capitalist moving like compassionist once again, what are you talking about, sir? And the blogger took that moment to note that allegedly the MP was donating said bottles of water while the blogger accused him of being under investigation by the same police. So, you know, it seems like there's some kind of conflict, something donating water while being under investigation kind of thing is what was said was the defamatory statements made by the blogger. She claimed it was public knowledge. This was her defense. She claimed it was public knowledge that Munilal was the subject of an investigation by the police since 2017 and also produced a purported search warrant which she posted. Barrett maintained the information was of public importance, factual, already in the public sphere, and undisputed. Now, when I saw this about a warrant, I was like, well, then she was supposed to win this case because the truth is always a good defense. But apparently, during the case, when it was asked for her to present the warrant as evidence, she couldn't. Turning to Barrett's defenses, she said her claim of justification failed as she did not provide any evidence to prove that the claimant was being investigated by the TTPS when the alleged defamatory words were published. According to the judge, Barrett failed to produce an authentic search warrant. On the face of the digital copy which she produced, it was not authentic. So, according to the judge, it seems like the warrant that was posted as evidence was inauthentic. So, how can you accuse someone of an investigation being launched against them using what the judge said seemed to be an inauthentic document? The defendant was unable to adduce any evidence from the TTPS to prove that the comment Munilal is currently under investigation by the TTPS was true, and there was no evidence that those words were protected by privilege. In the WhatsApp conversation she had with the claimant being Munilal, she was informed that the said warrant was fake and it was the subject of litigation by his attorneys at law. So, allegedly, according to what went down in the court case, what the judge is saying is that the blogger was told that this is a fake warrant. This isn't true. And according to the judge, even after that, the blogger still blogged what they blogged. And if that be the case, then defamation seems well fitting. Like, I like freedom of speech. I like talking. I like being able to talk. I like being able to say things. I like being able to express my opinions and my views. But I think I understand that there's some responsibility there. You don't just randomly say things that you can't prove. Things that can and do hurt people's public image. That's true. Moving into the source, the news source here. Ooh, the real source of the matter. Our opposition leader is tripling down on the race approach to politics. Things that some people would have only wanted to allow as a undercurrent under the surface, a suggestion that people pick up as a dog whistle, if you will. Tantikams is saying, apparently, forget about that. Whistle the whistle, loud, let everybody hear. No Indians qualify for PNM safe seats. Kamla on OWTU picks for Library Point. Opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisasa says that the People's National Movement is not truly representative of all the people, as not one East Indian was chosen to contest a PNM safe seat. The Oilfield Workers Trade Union has selected former Secretary General of the Communication Workers Union, Clyde Elder, to contest the Library seat, and OWTU Vice President Ernesto Quesada to fight the Point 14 seat under a United National Congress ticket. Asked how she would respond to the criticisms that the UNC's coalition of interests partners allocated what are perceived to be PNM safe seats, Prasad Bisasa said that seats are allocated based on whichever partner has a strategic advantage in that particular constituency. if you look at the allocation done by the PNM, not a single East Indian was given a safe PNM seat. They are just there simply for window dressing. Every guaranteed PNM seat has a non-Indian PNM candidate. What is the strategy behind that allocation, she asked. I hate this. There's a global organization for the progress of people of Indian origin, GoPU. I don't know if they still exist. I believe they do. They're vocal. This is for them to say, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar is not supposed to be the key fighter for people of Indian origin. She is going up to be the main representative for our country. So, if her statement on how UNC runs things is that the people most suitable for the job is who gets the job, on what grounds do you then pick up a racial identitarian bent questioning the other side? It's like someone made the point. She is speaking about anti-woke and woke this and woke that, but then jumping in to speak a kind of racial essentialism here. Persad-Bissessar noted the PNM has selected East Indian candidates to contest UNC safe seats and marginals, which they will lose, she says. Following the next general election, there will not be a single East Indian on the PNM lower house benches because none have met the PNM screenings criteria to get a PNM safe seat. How come the so-called commentators have not noticed that, but pay so much attention to our seat allocation? What criteria did Rowley and the PNM screening committee use to determine that no Indians were qualified for a PNM safe seat? The PNM should tell the country. She went on. If you all thought that was as far as she went, you were wrong. She went further. That is an insult and smear to half the population that the PNM screening committee couldn't find one non-thieving, non-devil worshipping Indian to give a safe seat. I didn't say that, I am quoting our opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And let's not mistake the angle that this is attempting to take. She is suggesting that a racial population in the island should be insulted because the PNM doesn't have one of their race in a safe seat. And you know, part of the near dishonesty of some of that is that, and this is why I say it comes off as if you are an Indian activist, and Kamala Persad-Bissessar is not supposed to be an Indian activist, because it's not even alleging that per se one group is overrepresented, because that's not true in the PNM. And this is the point I made when she raised the race specter last week. The PNM is not really the same party that it was before, especially with Stuart Young as the leader. Stuart Young is in a PNM safe seat. And okay, he might not be East Indian, but he's half. I believe they have Simon de Nobrega in a safe seat. I believe Colm Imbert recently got back his spot. I mean, there is some diversity there. If you're looking for a diverse cast, there's a diverse cast. Who does Mrs. Prasad Bisesa think she's winning over to her side with this line of attack? With this line that East Indians should take this as an insult. And then it's interesting to me. In these statements that she's making, she is levying insults at the East Indian community. And then making the accusation that these insults are what other people are seeing. But no one said this. This talk about thieving and devil worshipping that she brought up wasn't brought up by anyone else. So the idea here is to purposefully put in an insult to cause an emotional reaction and gain people to your side. I think this is horrible for politics. Horrible stuff. Like, this is the angle of all the angles that she chose, that she could try. This is the angle. This is really the angle. That the PNM think Indians are thieving and devil worshipping, so y'all Indians should feel insulted and don't vote for them. Are we really still trying to go down that line? I just don't think it's even going to work. I don't think it's going to work. And in a similar light, if she brought that up for questioning, wouldn't it be asked similarly on the UNC side? What's that even? And to think these unions are tying in there closely. CWU distances itself from Elders UNC election run. The Communication Workers Union is distancing itself from its former Secretary General, Clyde Elder, after he entered the general election race as a candidate under the United National Congress banner. The union yesterday made it abundantly clear that it has no affiliation with Elder's campaign, nor is it in support of the UNC's coalition of interests. The OWTU presented Elder and Ernesto Quesada as the trade union movement's candidates for Labrie and Point Fortin respectively, under the UNC coalition, after the pair was screened by the opposition party on Wednesday. In a release yesterday, however, CWU's present Secretary General, Joan Ogier, also debunked claims that the union met with the joint trade union movement to endorse Elder as a candidate. According to Ogier, the CWU only found out about Elder's candidacy on Wednesday, which was when he screened for the position at the UNC's headquarters in Chaguanas. Listen. The opposition leader needs to resign as political leader, Abdul says, so long time. Listen, I don't like these unions a bit. I don't like these unions a bit. So often it seems like many of these unionists are opportunists. Like, they're opportunists. They're there trying to say, yes, all of us, let's work together, we're getting the best for the workers, and the moment they can get opportunity to elevate themselves, they're going to elevate themselves. And you see, that's the problem with the unionist philosophy. That's the problem with the philosophy that the unions hold on to, that so happens to be a collectivist philosophy. And the unions call themselves this, they are collectives, and the collectivist philosophy is wrong about human nature. It misunderstands or lies about human nature. This idea that humans can function from him according to his ability to him according to his need. The idea of the collective. So, you know, if you are able to give more, you give more. While if you need more, you get more. And that's how we decide how much people give, and that's how we decide how much people get. But the problem is humans are that kind of nice, caring, magnanimous creature. The moment one person is given the authority to determine the moment one person is given the power, one person is given the money, they're going to hold on to it. Inevitably, it's the way it always happens. Read Animal Farm, for goodness sakes. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than some. But the CWU, the union that one of the representatives once was a part of, they want no part of this. And let's look at it, how it happened. How did it go before? We had a partnership between a Kamla-led UNC and the unions already. We had a union leader as Minister of Labor. Yes, we did, Abdul. We did. Those men spoke a whole lot, but the moment their mouths were filled and stuffed, there was no room for them to ever speak again. You want to retire a union leader? Give him a job that gets him rich. And watch how nice and quiet he goes into retirement. It's how Roger with the UNC and Munilal owing him 500k. Doesn't matter really. Convenient friends. MSJ leader monitoring union leaders contesting seats for UNC. The Movement for Social Justice leader David Abdullah says he's closely monitoring the candidacy of 2 Labour representatives under a UNC banner in the upcoming general election. Speaking with Guardian Media on Wednesday, hours before former Communication Workers Union, we know who the men are, Abdul said an official statement on the development will be released in the coming days. The representatives nominated by WTU were the sole nominees to face the UNC screening committee for those seats. It's interesting, innit? The MSJ is a party for unions. Good night, Michael Modesto. Well, Abdul is only so broke he'll be now because a blogger owes him 75k. A certain blogger owes him a 75 stack. So he'll get a little something in the kitty. Why are we not considering the MSG as a possible option? Well, they don't contest all the seats, for one. We don't know who their candidates are, for 2. And then for 3, which is primary of them, they lean communist and I don't trust them even a little bit. I don't want that kind of... We are already leaning towards the left side enough in this country. We don't need any more. How are we to put people in charge of the country? The people who tell us that our public service is always understaffed and overworked. Every union would say it. Our public service is understaffed and overworked. So how is that going to turn out if they get control? No thanks. I'm good. But nonetheless, all of these other Nathan is coming is such a bad ideology. It is evil. It is reprehensible. Communism is theft. It is theft. The idea that someone should look at what I have and determine that I have enough, and they should be able to take it to give it to someone else who they determine needs some more. That's ridiculous. That's not for a government to do. That's theft. So yes, it is such a bad ideology. It is a horrible ideology. It doesn't work. It has never worked. Never, not once. And in fact, it leads to mass death, more than likely. And I mean, if you think about the suppositions of communism just on the face of it in your real life, you'd understand this does not make sense. This doesn't make sense. Do you trust that it would make more sense that we donate all our money to Colm Imbert in central government, and then as the month comes, Colm Imbert would redistribute that money to all of us, our citizens, and decide where it would be best spent? Does that sound like it makes more sense to you? And I mean, it's an oversimplification, and that's not exactly what communism is, but it kinda is. The idea that some central planner would be able to decide what's best for everything, no. You can't allow imperfection. You can't allow things being difficult to allow you to choose what is, of course, going to fail. That won't make sense. And the attitude that we need to try anything is a bad attitude. No, you don't need to try anything. If you are feeling sick, if you have some kind of flu, you don't need to try anything. There are many things you could try that will make it a whole lot worse. You know? Certain chemicals, you ingest them saying you need to try anything to get rid of your cold, and that will be the last cold you ever had. In fact, it will be the last thing you ever did on a whole. So, yeah, I will say it is that bad. But, as I was going to say, for all of the other unionists, they share that same belief. So if you share that unionist belief, why would you not join MSJ? Don't unions believe in solidarity for the people? I would like a journalist to ask the OWTU, the unionists who are going up under the UNC right now, what different do they expect to happen as contrary or as averse to what happened in 2010 to 2015? Or are they expecting the same thing that happened then to happen again? Good night, Trini born and bred. Good night, good night. Anisette endorses trade union alliance with UNC. Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union President Michael Anisette has endorsed the decision by two union leaders to contest seats with the United National Congress. On Wednesday, we know that, speaking in Barbados on Wednesday, where he was attending the 40th regular meeting of the Conference of CARICOM Heads of Government in his capacity as General Secretary of the Caribbean Congress of Labour, he said he saw no issue with the alliance as politics and trade unionism go hand in hand. acknowledging that both the OWTU and UNC leader Kamla Prasad Bisesa have had a tumultuous relationship in the past, and he said, you live with a wife, you mash up and break up and then make back up. The issue to me is whether or not the UNC or any political party has a labor agenda where labor, workers, and people become the center of whatever policy that any government in power puts forward. That makes no sense. And the Lalani said is so true, Abdul. I don't have the court close necessary to say all of the reasons I will lull, but lull. Lots of laughs. When you hear these people, speak about, honesty and all of that. Nathan, is China a communist party? You mean a country? Because there's a communist party that runs China as a communist country. So yes, China is a communist country that is run by a communist party. Bear in mind, not all communist countries run the same. China allowed some sections of free market to slip into their communist system to allow for money, wealth. China is communism mixed with capitalism. Yeah, no. It's because it's communism that puts on the face of capitalism to function in capitalist markets. And so it's communism functioning amongst capitalist markets. Yeah, if they do, that is true, Michael Modesto. And what do you mean in terms of China working? Do you want to go live China? You would like to go live China? Pretty sure not. Would you not say China is very developed and productive under communist rule? I'd say productive, but not very developed, not at all. Not even close. And it's not a place that anyone would want to go live. If you are a Communist Party member in China and you live along those lines, you could live a nice, very lucrative life, very posh life. But if you are a party member in North Korea, you could live a posh life too. But even in the case of China, China only became functional when they opened up some of their markets. And it's a dance that the Chinese Communist Party does. They open up their markets to allow for the wealth of capitalism and the free market to come in. And then as that wealth continues coming in, they get the struggles of the free market where as people build up their individual wealth, they tend to get their individual minds. So China opens and then shuts, and then opens and then shuts, and then opens. So Jack Ma, yeah, you can get that Alibaba, but sir, careful with that mouth because now you are disappeared. Richest man in China, just gone. And when we're talking about systems that are good for running a country, we're talking about as citizens of a country, as an average citizen of a country. How easy is it for you to make a living, to make a life? Can you just go out? Can you go to China? Let's say you were born in China and decide that you want to learn how to do something and just decide to do it and go make a living doing it out of your free will? No, it's not that. That's not really the case. That's not how it functions. So as a free everyday citizen, you don't have those privileges. Which system of government is really good for which and all have pros and cons. That's true. That's true. As who was it? I think it was Churchill said democracy is the worst style of government we've found except for the others, or something like that. And I don't think democracy is automatically good. I always say that. I don't have this assumption that democracy means good. I don't think that the statement, what's the Latin? Vox populi, vox Dei. I don't think that's true. The voice of the people is the voice of God. No. On occasion, the voice of the people is the voice of the devil. So no, I don't think democracy is automatically the best thing. If I were to controversial probably, but if I were to say a dream world scenario of what might be best is miniature monarchies to some extent. You see, we have a horrible taste in our mouth because we just know the horrible history of monarchies. But the idea of a monarchy where a family has their own legacy tied to the prosperity and benefit of a country, or of a nation, or of a region. It's kind of the idea of capitalism in a sense, where the idea of capitalism is that the one thing you could count on human beings to do is seek their own interests. So if we build a system where everybody benefits by seeking their own interests, then everybody is going to benefit. And that's kind of the idea of the free market of a capitalist system. Everybody seeks their own interests. Everybody seeks their own interests, and the system balances based on that. That's what you could depend on. And in a sense, a monarchy does something like that, because it would be in the monarch's interest to make sure wherever their realm is remains well running. Is TNT running under a true democracy? I guess it's according to what you mean by true democracy. Nearly nowhere is a full true democracy. Most places are republics because a democracy is a chaotic thing. A full democracy is a pretty chaotic business, and a full true democracy is mob rule. Mob rule isn't exactly the most effective thing. Crowds are swayed by the people you do not want crowds to be swayed by. So you don't necessarily want plain mob rule. The idea of a republic is that you have a representative democracy. So you have democratic groups of democracies, if you will, a voting constituency in a regional area, and they select a leader with democracy. Through that democratic means, they select a leader, and that leader represents them in the government. Republican democracy. That way, the idea is you could choose someone who you believe has the right attitude, who has the right views, who is in line with the things that you want, and allow them to go and make more of the nitty-gritty decisions instead of trying to ask the population everything. Trinidad needs a nationalist leader right now. I agree. And I think, especially with countries like Trinidad, with a country as multicultural as ours, to make our country effective, you have to go heavy in on the nationalism. Because that's the only real unifying lightning rod for the country. You can't unify around religion. You can't unify around race. That's why what Tantikams is doing there, I think, is such a foolish thing. We ever had a nationalist leader? No. Even Eric Williams, he was a regionalist, if you will. He wasn't exactly nationalist. But yeah, I think what you need in a country like ours is to unify around the few things that can unify us, the national identity kind of thing. So Nathan, what in your analysis is the main problem we are having with the system of governance in Trinidad and Tobago? The main problem? We are very bureaucratic. That's one of the issues. With the governance. We are very bureaucratic. There are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. So the buck stops with no one, and everyone is accountable and no one is accountable. So, I understand why we are like that. The reason we are like that is to attempt to put checks and balances in the system of governance to make sure that people don't do corrupt things. But many of those checks and balances, to me, just make the system bureaucratically heavy and impossible to get anything done really and truly. How is it? Like one of the things that annoys me incessantly, especially over the last year, it happened a few times. Our Prime Minister was lamenting about the situation in the country that he has led for basically the last 10 years. Like, how does that work, sir? And what he might see is the reason for that is because there are things that he would like to execute that he cannot. Bureaucracy was really about checks and balances and not bottlenecks, but the rule of unintended consequences, that's the way things go. Yes, that it was intended to just be about checks and balances, but yes, it also creates bottlenecks. And the bottlenecks also make it easy for corruption to happen on the other side too. That's why to a libertarian extent, I agree with the approach taken by the Argentine president Milei, where he took a chainsaw. That was his campaign, a chainsaw, and ran that chainsaw through Argentina's public service, basically. Chop it up. Remove big chunks of it, big chunks of the bureaucracy. Make it much smaller. And the thing is, at least there will be accountability in so many areas. So much more accountability. There's little to no accountability. The setup we have here. A commissioner of police is appointed by the president after they get a merit list from the commission, but they have to consult with the prime minister and the opposition. Nonsense. What about JAM and BIM coming to investigate the missing ammunition? No faith in that. Adult as ministers and permanent secretaries are not functioning. I know what you mean there. Like I said, I've said this before. I think to a large extent, a lot of the political directorate in our country are just figureheads. They don't actually do much. They are cogs in a wheel, and the machine moves how the machine moves, and you could swap them out and there isn't going to be a difference. And to me, that is undemocratic. Like, I see this argument going on right now in the US as they try to do some slashing of their own government too. And some people are saying that's not democratic, that's against democracy, that's a horrible thing for the people. But I think it's actually vice versa to that. It should be that there should be the possibility that I could vote someone in who is going to revolutionarily change the setup of Trinidad and Tobago. I should be able to vote for that. That should be a democratic option. The person I vote for should have the ability to actually enact change. Even if you make it small, Nathan, corruption is really an ethical issue. True leadership is lacking. But here's the thing. If it's smaller, the corruption matters much less. If the government is in charge of educating my child from preschool all the way through to university, and the government is racial and biased against people who look like me, that becomes a much more significant problem. But if the government, all the government does is draw signs on the road, paint the lines in the middle of the road, that's the only job of the government. If they're racial and prejudiced against people who look like me, I don't really care, because they don't have that much effect on my life. And that's the idea of a smaller footprint and a less bureaucratic system. They have less of an impact on your life. Like, there's no way in a corrupt country like ours we are supposed to have roadblocks that go through the fine letter of your car's safety and give you thousands of dollars in tickets for that. That's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And people will like to jump in when you say things like that. People like to jump in. The law is the law, you know. And all you too lawless. That's the problem in Trinidad. All you people do lawless. All you don't like to obey no law in the place. No, that's not the problem. The problem is you all selectively enforce which laws you all want to be serious about. And you all are selecting the most trivial of laws to be serious about. So if you are going to selectively enforce some of the laws and not enforce the rest, the ones I will choose for you to not enforce is a crack on windscreen. Do you believe Trinidadians are capable of running the country? Maybe we are not. That's a question they ask all the way through to Africa. You know? You can ask that about South Africa too, if you want to be brutally honest. When the white people left South Africa, did the blacks that take over run it better? When the whites that ran Rhodesia left and it became Zimbabwe, did the blacks that take over run it better? Are these black people capable of running any country in the world? Are you sure you want to ask that question? I think, to a large extent, the reason for some of that, and even amongst the black people, the Africans, the Caribbean also, I think the reason for some of that is because a lot of our countries, especially former colonial countries, we were convinced and held on to a kind of socialist communist style and lean and bent in governance. Most of Africa did, a lot of the Caribbean did. You read the writings of Eric Williams, he clearly had a bit of a left bite. A left bug bit him too. And it's understandable why. Most of these countries, Africa and the Caribbean, were colonized and advantaged by the countries that became the capitalist powers. So if you are advantaged by the countries that became the capitalist powers, and then throughout the 20th century, when you were gaining your independence, there was a Cold War, a war simmering under the surface across the whole world, and it was a war battling between the capitalist powers and this new philosophy that says every man should live equally. And I'm getting my independence now as a nation. Which philosophy do I hold closer to? The philosophy of my oppressors, or a philosophy that says, in a revolutionary new way, we can all live perfectly harmoniously together? So obviously, Africa, along with the Caribbean, held on to quite a bit of left-wing ideals. And that's why we became so bureaucratic. Well, not that's why, but that's part of the reason why we became so bureaucratic. The Soviet Union, the main sun, the main satellite, the main source of that leftward style of governance. Soviet basically means committee. So the Soviet Union was basically the committee union. Everything ran on committee. And for those of you who know Trinidad, oh, you know that. You see that committee? We love those. The Caribbean, the African nations, we love those. You see, the committee doesn't have that oppressive single leader. You spread out the leadership across the committee. And corruption more self. Let's see if we could just browse through at least that very interesting drug story. Very, very interesting. The Western powers ensure that African nations do not develop. How do they ensure that, Joe Gibbs? How do the Western powers ensure that African nations do not develop? Hey, Kramak. How do they do that? And why do they do that? Undermine them. The West. Joe Gibbs, how do they do that? Burkina Faso is charting its own course at the moment. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. By keeping them destabilized. And how are they kept destabilized? How are they kept destabilized? By internal fighting. So, they fight themselves. Keep them in a state of dependence. But here's the thing that sounds strange about both of those suggestions. They fight themselves and they keep them in a state of dependence. Both of those things are choices that the people are making. They could choose whether or not to fight themselves. They could refuse help. But when Donald Trump and they axed USAID, there were African nations lamenting and crying over them not going to be receiving any more help. So, they want to be kept dependent, at least some. And the reality is, I think the evil the European nations did really happened when they countrified Africa. They made Africa into those several big countries. That was a big part of the problem right there. They didn't have to do much after that because tribalism took care of the rest. All Africans aren't one people. And every African country where there are multiple tribes has that battle, that pull, that push, that tug of war for who is going to be in control. And they get extremely violent over it. But how much of that you could blame on the outsiders, really and truly? the dependency problem. I heard somebody speak about that a while ago. I remember they were talking about the Tom's shoes. I saw a video on the Tom shoes. Someone was explaining this, an African woman, an African businesswoman, and she was explaining how those things make real problems in Africa. And Tom's shoes, when it came out, offered you buy one and they give one. So each one you buy, they give one away to a needy person out there in Africa. And when they come into a village and distribute 10,000 shoes, when they come to a village and distribute 10,000 shoes, what's going to happen to the shoemaker in that village? He isn't the only one, Mikhail. For sure, he isn't the only one. There has been interference. I don't deny that at all. But the way I would put it is, all countries attempt to interfere with all countries as much as they could. It's pretty the US has been attempting to interfere with Russia for a very long time. China interferes with the US. Likewise, on the US interfering with China. So, yes, I agree there has been interference, but that's kind of the way of the world. They're all interfering, attempting to get things to sway in their benefit. If that's the case though, and this is what I see, shouldn't people be happy with a president like the orange guy who wants to pull the United States out of those affairs more? Less interference. Do you all think if the Europeans did not colonize Africa, Africa would have been much better off? Anybody thinks that in the chat? That without colonization, Africa would have been a shining city on a hill, or at least there would have been shining cities on hills in Africa. Abdul Hakam says yes. Where? Which group you think would have been like that? Who was the closest? Bear in mind, Africa's colonization happened basically after the Caribbean, based on its trajectory. Yes, Nathan. Which region of Africa? Which tribe? You cannot assume they would not have progressed. Mali. Well, you can't assume. You could assume anything. You could assume anything you want. But generally speaking, progress seems to be the general trend of history. But I actually don't think so. Because Africa had the same problem for millennia. There hadn't been mighty nations in Africa before. Succession was always a big part of it. The Kingdom of Mali did not disintegrate because of the Europeans. The Songhai Empire did not disintegrate because of the Europeans. Egypt did not disintegrate because of the Europeans. But Egypt is a bit of a different one. Just to classify it a bit too, Egypt, Ethiopia are not sub-Saharan. Abdul Hakam says Europe and North America is rich because pillaging and exploiting Africa, Nathan. I wouldn't say only. They pillaged and exploited many other places. Many other places they pillaged and exploited Asia. They pillaged and exploited the New World too. So it wasn't just Africa. And it's not like that's special to the Europeans. Africans pillaged and exploited as far as they could too. That was the problem in Africa. Now, I don't know how many of you have studied the geography of Africa. The geography of Africa, for one, always made it very difficult for a native civilization to grow leaps and bounds. That's why, even for the thousands of years, by and large, all of Africa's advanced civilizations were on the same spots. They rose and fell from the same areas because geographical constraints geographical constraints made it very difficult. And then in sub-Sahara Africa, you're talking about the tsetse fly. The tsetse fly in Africa meant that most of the tropical regions where you could do animal husbandry, you couldn't do animal husbandry because the tsetse fly killed all of the animals. Abdul, yes, Europe was no different, but Europe became different. Europe united under a common religion, and that helped Europe. Similar as China, bear in mind, China as we know it. Sasha Orb, you come to do these one comments that you're dropping, knowing nothing. Drop one comment, you ain't know what you're saying, and fly out. Okay, Sasha, thanks for your input. Bye. China wasn't one region. China was a region subjugated basically by the empire that took over the whole region. And the homogenization of the entire region is what made it survive for a while. Abdul, that's what I was saying. The geography of Africa only allowed for certain places to develop alone. Other places were basically impossible, although it was humongous and had a lot of those natural resources. Good night, Kwesi Andrews. Europe is much smaller than Africa, but yes, it does. Yes, it does. And the development change. Like, look at the coastline to landmass ratio of all of the continents. Look at the coastline to landmass ratio of Europe. Look at the coastline to landmass ratio of Africa. Look at the coastline to landmass ratio of North America, South America, etc., etc. And there are some very difficult hurdles to climb over for Africa becoming a huge powerhouse. Not saying there weren't very powerful empires, but one of the major problem with many of the African empires was succession. Africa had and still does to a large extent practiced a lot of polygamy. Polygamy ruins succession in patrilineal families. It happened to African empires over and over. I enjoy reading the history of some of them because they have some very interesting, curious histories. But regularly read the history. Some guy had 60-something sons. When that some guy died, some of those sons all wanted a piece. And voila. So the massive empires of Africa didn't need the Europeans to out their flame. Their flames generally didn't last all on their own. And that level of polygamy, Sasha Orb, the one who says we don't know what we're saying here, that level of polygamy, go look at anthropology and see what are some of the main differences between polygamous and monogamous societies and tribes. Violence is one. Polygamy generally has a lot more violence. Cultures with polygamy, you don't have to think very hard to figure out why. So, if you have a more violent culture, naturally, and succession in advanced civilizations is difficult, you find yourself progressing to a level and then crashing and starting over. Progressing to a level, crashing and starting over. Progressing to a level, crashing and starting over. And even as powerful as some of those civilizations would be, if you progress to a level and have to start over, it's easy to be conquered by outside forces, or much easier to be conquered by the outside forces. But we don't know if they would have found common ground like Europe did. That's true. That's true. And I mean, is a supposition. Eh? So I suppose if there was a unifying culture that went through Africa that was able to unify them, all of the various tribes, and change their culture to a more receptive to advancement culture, then yeah, it would have happened. Of course. I'm not saying like something is defective with African people and no. That's not what I'm saying by any means. I'm just saying that the automatic assumption needs a little thought sometimes, because there are geographical reasons, social reasons, cultural reasons why things were the way they were. Why things were the way they were. It just didn't happen. But that's the thing too, Abdul. It didn't just not happen like that. The reason it happened the way it happened is for reasons. It happened the way it happened for reasons. And those were the reasons. When the slave trade began in earnest, the African slave trade, much of Africa still weren't even colonies. They were colonized after that. Many of the African enslaved people left free, independent African nations. That's where they left. Anyway, people, that's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. I am Nathan Springer. This has been the Mindful Live. I'll see you guys again for the next one, Monday next week. No live over the weekend, folks. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Stay inside and outside sketchy. Marry some good Trini and make some good Trini picnics out here. We need some people to pay we pension when we get older. All right? I hope you all stay well. That's all I have for now. As I said, I'll see you guys Monday. Until then, people, peace, love, blessings. Bye.